Hello and welcome to another episode of the Popcorn Conspiracy. I'm Dave G, and joining me now is my co-host.
Hello everybody, I'm Kyle.
And today we're going to be taking a look at another one of the Netflix movies that's been coming out while the entire world is in lockdown. It's The Old Guard. Now, this is a movie that is another one of those films that's kind of like Extraction. It was originally meant to be a kind of Netflix movie that went onto the big screen. Of course, we've seen over the last couple of years, Netflix have become quite successful with movies like The Irishman and Marriage Story, and then this year with Extraction, and now The Old Guard, which was supposed to be another one of these Netflix cinema crossovers. It all revolves around two characters, Andy, played by Charlize Theron, and Niall, played by Kiki Lane. Now, Niall is killed during a military operation, and she then wakes up and finds herself an outcast because people can't believe that she survived what she's just been through. She's soon recruited by Andy, played by Charlize Theron, who's got some pretty big secrets that she needs to tell her, including the fact that they are actually immortal but not immortal. I'll go into that a little bit later on. But they're also being hunted down by Copley, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, who is working for somebody, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. And he's hunting down these group of immortal mercenaries and trying to hunt them down to capture them. Now, mate, this is, if it sounds like a little bit of a far-fetched movie, it is because it is a superhero movie based on a comic book. Mate, I gotta ask, what did you think of The Old Guard? Because I'm still greatly confused by this film.
Yeah, I guess I can never tell really what to expect with like Netflix productions now. I think maybe around award season we'll get movies like The Irishman and Marriage Story, like really great movies like that. And then throughout the rest of the year we'll get much more like dumbed down movies like Extraction and like The Old Guard.
Kissing Booth 2.
Yeah, you'll get a lot more of those kind of movies around like this time of the year. I guess that's maybe their business plan. Yeah, I thought this was an interesting concept. I know it's based off a graphic novel. I thought it was like an interesting idea, but I didn't think it was really utilized as well as it could have been. Like the idea is basically like Expendables crossed with Highlander. And it sounds silly, but it could have been really entertaining. I just don't think the filmmakers really pulled it off. One of the biggest movies I think the movie has is it really has a lack of an identity of its own.
Yeah.
Like immortal characters have been done multiple times in other TV shows and movies, and like whether it's vampires or whatever, and not much of this movie really felt very unique or original. And so I kept finding myself throughout the entire thing being reminded of Highlander and comparing this movie to that and thinking about how this movie failed in a character and story level in the same way that Highlander succeeded, as well as various other movies that have kind of tackled the same kind of immortal concept. But yeah, what did you think of it, dude?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. If I read a description of what this movie was going to be about, it would be the kind of film that I would actually want to see. But I have a real feeling with this movie that perhaps one of the issues with it is the fact that the screenwriter, who does have film writing credit, so I'm not trying to dismiss that because he's written movies like Whiteout and stuff in the past. I kind of get the feeling that this might have been one of those films where actually getting the creator of the comic books to write the screenplay was actually a bad idea, because it almost felt like this film needed an outside writer to come in, because it's not an overly complicated story, but it feels like it turns back on itself so many times. It's like, oh yeah, we're a team of immortals, but we're dying. It's like, what? Like, even that in itself doesn't quite ring true. Like, it's Yeah, it felt like it needed a better setup for how it was going to go about telling the story, and it's something that, like, for years I found with a lot of different movies. Like, I think it's one of the reasons why I like Maze Runner and Divergent, but I'm not that big on Hunger Games, because I think they set up their worlds a lot better. Whereas with Hunger Games, it almost felt at times in that movie that it was trying to almost dumb it down too much, but at the same time keeping stuff from the audience because they had to keep it from Katniss. Whereas with Divergent, you saw both sides very early on. You saw what the Gillian Anderson character was doing, and you also saw what was happening with the characters that you were focusing on as well. Same with Maze Runner. Maze Runner, brilliantly for the first film, doesn't give you any indication of what's going on in the outside world, but then when it does, it goes 50-50, so you know what's going on. Here, it just felt like they tried to make the movie too much like the comic book. I know that sounds really weird because normally the complaint is, oh, it doesn't feel anything like the comic book. But with this, the story is so basic with the comic book that you felt like you needed more in the cinematic version of it, because to me this just felt like a movie where it was like, oh, what do we do next? Oh, let's just have another fight. And then bits and pieces in this movie where it's like two characters stay in a room and the fight happens outside and you miss half of it. It's like I think it kind of like forgot that it wasn't a comic book in that sequence. Like, in a comic, it might work great that the two characters are sitting in the room and you can hear like biff, pow, bang outside the room. Doesn't quite work as much in cinema where you're actually going for a very visual style. I don't know, it felt lazy, this film, and I hate saying that because this kind of thing about immortal gods is something that I would normally love. Like, for goodness sake, I loved that movie a few years ago with trying to think of Gods of Egypt, which was like an awful movie, but I loved the stuff behind it. Whereas with this movie, I just didn't gel with it.
Yeah, I guess it's. I did think that myself when I saw that the movie was written by the same guy that had written the comic book, and it made me think that there's sometimes it doesn't really work out. Like, you think it should work, having the even talking about novels or whatever. Like, you think sometimes it should work having the author of the original novel writing the movie, but quite often it doesn't work out that well. And again, like the difference between scripting a comic book versus scripting an action movie. I really think, being a movie about immortals, the movie needed to have a lot more focus on flashbacks, and the history of these characters through the flashbacks. But the movie has a real focus on tell, don't show. Like, we don't see the relationship between Andy, Charlize Theron's character, and her current crew. We don't see it forming, and we definitely don't see her relationships with the characters in her past, like the other immortals who've died or been taken from her in the hundreds of years that she's been alive. We're just told about these things happening, and we're shown very brief clips of Charlize Theron looking kind of ridiculous in a Viking outfit and crying over some Moorish guy as he's bleeding to death, and told, oh, he was another immortal that we were brothers, and he was like my brother, and we don't know anything about these characters. Like, this is supposed to be a major part of her life and something that's deeply affected her outlook on the world, and it completely falls flat because of how badly it's handled. This wasn't just a problem with the immortal characters either, because Niall, who is discovering this new life as an immortal, like, this is only within the first few days. The entire movie takes place over maybe the first few days of her realizing that she can't die. She suffers the same kind of character problems. Like, there's a bunch of talk about how she's going to have to leave her family behind, and how she's never going to age, but her family are going to die, and there's a whole lot of talk about that. She's never going to see them again, and she has to let them go and all that. But all we see of them is a wallpaper on a smartphone. Like, it may as well be a picture of a boyfriend or a pet dog. Like, it doesn't have any weight to it.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And I think it's one of the big issues with this film. Like, one of the is that it almost needs to be a television series. Like, when I was watching this and was trying to, like, think what it kind of reminded me of that worked, I kept on going back to the television series with Jessica Alba, Dark Angel, where they just got that mix right of where she was at that time, and then flashbacks to what it was like when she was being trained to become the soldier that she was. And I almost get the feeling that instead of working as a movie, this would have been a great Netflix series, like, as in an actual, like, 12-part series kind of thing, so that you had room for those flashbacks. Because I think one of the issues with this film might have been, and I don't know, maybe I'm really wrong, but I wonder if there's a director's cut out there that's a lot longer. But the fact that this movie already ran for 2 hours and 5 minutes might have made them want to cut it back a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. It's really difficult as well, because you do have, like, that two central main characters in Niall and Andy that you both, like, I almost wanted to know, has any shit like this happened in Niall's past before as well? Like, has there been other indications where she's, like, fallen off her bike and thought she's broken her arm and it's healed straight away kind of thing? But because it was, like, done in movie form, and you did have so many central characters, it felt kind of like everything was rushed. Like, even when you look at the poster and a lot of the stills from the film, it is the 5 immortal characters that the focus is on, but it's impossible to do this movie and have, like, identical flashbacks and pasts of all 5 characters, so they kind of like take the short way out. Like, not trying to be homophobic or anything like that, but the 2 gay characters in this feel like the same character. Every character feels like a walking cliche because you don't get that 3-dimensional look at them. Even the character of Merrick, which is played by Harry Melling from the Harry Potter franchise, they make him a walking cliche. Whereas just recently I watched the family film Think Like a Dog, where they have a very similar kind of character, but because it's got a comedic side to it, they've actually gone and got one of the actors from Big Bang Theory to play the bad guy, and it works because he can bring in a little bit of comedy. But the really weird thing is, he actually feels like, even though it's comedic, that his role is more serious than the role of Merrick here, where this is supposed to be a serious movie. It's like, yeah, all these characters have just become cliches. Even with what happens with Copley as a character, what happens to Copley feels like the beginning of a television show at the end of the movie. It's really weird. And the other movie that I found myself comparing this to was Bloodshot, which wasn't a great action movie, but it worked more in the sense that it gave us more of an idea of, like, flashbacks from the characters and stuff like that. But they actually got a serious actor to play the bad guy, and even though he was a little bit of a cliche, he was nowhere near as bad as a cliche as what some of the characters were in this. So I think, again, that probably would have helped if you hadn't have had the same writer as you did from the comic book series, because he's basically written them as the cliches that they are in the comic book series.
Yeah, like how, I guess, like in a comic book, how you would show a flashback of one character would just be like a single panel of them riding on a horse or something. But, like, you need more than that in a movie. And I don't think it's homophobic at all what you're saying. The 2 characters, Joe and Nikki, the fact that they're homosexual and that they love each other, that's literally the only character thing that they have. We know nothing about them in the movie other than the fact that they're both lovers.
Yeah.
And the movie keeps reminding you of that instead of anything else.
Yeah.
That's it. There's a scene they're threatened. They're captured and threatened by some henchmen. They say some homophobic stuff towards him, and they say, "Ha, no, you're a child. He's my moon and my stars, and this and that." It's like this really kind of flowery dialogue, and then they make out, and like you're kind of thinking this movie's kind of grinded to a halt, so you can can show this like kind of pointless thing, and it doesn't help the characters. It doesn't help our understanding of these two people. It just makes them more shallow.
Which is again something you could get away with if it was a series. Like if you wanted to do an episode and it was a flashback story, like a flashback episode of how Joe and Nikki got together, you can do it with a television series. You can do it in a comic book. In a comic book, you just go, okay, issue 67 is Joe and Nikki's story of how they got together. It doesn't work so well, though, in a movie, especially when it's a movie that already overruns like this film does.
Yeah, it's already like over 2 hours, and that should be more than enough time to tell a story like this. It's obviously set up to be a franchise. Like there's no getting along that. Like a lot of the characters they establish, and basically just the whole thing. The movie pretty much ends with a to be continued kind of thing. Like it. Rather than trying to tell its own story with its own like set standalone characters, and then after that, okay, then build on that. Like if you want to do sequels, you can. But like, how about you just focus on this one movie for now, rather than okay, well we'll introduce this character and this character and this character, and maybe in the next movie we'll explain like the relationship between these two characters. Like you said, that's TV show writing. That's like that's what you do in a series. You don't do that in a movie. Otherwise, it just doesn't make your movie work. It makes your characters really thin.
Yeah.
By comparison, like Highlander's a movie that's had a lot of sequels and TV shows, and a lot of them have been pretty shit. But the first one was really great, and like by comparison, like it had a huge focus on flashbacks. Like the movie was set in the present, but almost half of the movie was flashbacks over the course of this guy's life, showing him as a regular human who was ostracized from his clan, and he spends his life with his wife, but like they can't have kids, and she gets old and dies, and he keeps on living. And it helps you understand like why this character's kind of become such a kind of jaded, this jaded warrior that he's become. Like he's completely different in the modern setting than he was when he thought he was normal, when he thought he was a human. He was just a fun-loving guy back then, and now he's this really bitter, jaded guy. And that's kind of what they're trying to do here in this film, but you don't see, like, there's none of that build. And Charlize Theron, as great of an actress as she is, she can't do... She's only as good as the movie allows her to be.
Yeah.
So, like, she can't really work miracles with what she's given here. I just say, maybe there's a director's cut, but I don't know, I kind of doubt it, because, like you say, it really does seem to be setting up... the idea of maybe they'll explain this stuff in flashbacks in future movies, not in this one.
Yeah.
Like I really like movies with stories that show like what a horrible thing immortality is. Like Interview with the Vampire did it, and Highlander did it, and like I didn't get anything like that in this one. It's a horrible thing, but it's a horrible thing because, I guess, for the same reason that we know because of all these other movies that we've watched. Like I say, there was nothing really unique to this movie.
Yeah.
Like even the idea that the characters, they've reached a point where they're trying to do good things and they're trying to help the world. Like, okay, we have this gift, maybe we'll try to help people with it, and then becoming kind of cynical because it doesn't seem to work. Like the world seems to still be on a downward spiral, like regardless of anything that they do. I thought that was an interesting idea, but the movie then became muddled because it, without giving too much away, it kind of hints like that they are making changes. They're just not quite aware of it.
Yeah,
like it's a lot. Like it's they are helping the world, but it's something. They're helping the world in ways that they can't see straight away, and not for a long time. But the movie then seems to forget that because they go back to, no, let's save the world again. You know, like it's kind of a thing that could have worked. That could have been interesting. Like something about like, yeah, do this, do the right thing, even if you don't see immediate results. But yeah, just it didn't really pull that off like anything else.
Yeah. I think for me the best way this would have worked is as a series, like some of the series that I've loved over the years. I mentioned Dark Angel, the original La Femme Nikita, stuff like that. It just gives you more room. Even Alias, like it gives you more room to explain the world that the characters are in and to have those flashbacks. Like if you remember back to Alias, when the character was finding out more about her life and stuff like with her parents, you just go into a flashback and it would just work so much better. So yeah, I don't know, just for me, I think Old Guard would have worked so much better as a 12-part series. And you know what, if Charlize Theron and people like that signed up for like a 3-4 movie franchise like people are saying, I'm pretty sure they would have signed up to do a 12-part like television series, because the amount of time that it probably took to make this movie would have equaled about the same amount of time as it would have taken to make a 12-week series. So yeah, I don't know, it feels like it's just not doing justice to the story by having it operate in a movie like this.
Like definitely it really fails to establish like a decent villain, as well as like really establishing its main characters. It really fails to establish like a real villain. Like the main villain's some young farmer CEO who wants to experiment on this crew to find the secret of their immortality and to make money off of it. And he's not threatening at all, because they got the guy who played Dudley Dursley in Harry Potter to play him. And there's no real like physically threatening number 2 guy or girl.
At least get Tom Felton.
Yeah, like some kind of threatening. But I don't like really hang too much on the actor that they got to play it, because maybe Tom Felton could have been his henchman. I don't know. But like Charlize Theron couldn't really work miracles with her character. Like this guy couldn't really do anything as a villain. But like instead, like there was no real threat to our heroes, like their mortality, like they're immortal going up against this big farmer villain and his army of faceless, nameless henchmen who die by the dozen in gunfights against the immortal heroes. Like at no point do they find a way to make these henchmen an actual threat. Like they've got no special training or unique weaponry that make them extra dangerous. They're just cannon fodder for the heroes to mow their way through. Like even in John Wick, like after 3 movies, towards the end of the 3rd movie, you think, oh yeah, John Wick, he's going through another room, killing another few dozen enemies. But like even in John Wick 3, they had him up, like he was up against heavily armored enemies that he couldn't just shoot like he would anyone else. No, he had to get like proper ammunition. He had to like shoot them in a specific spot in order to take them down. He had to use like really super powerful guns and super powerful like armor piercing rounds in order to actually take these guys down. Like they even in that they tried to work some kind of way so it wasn't just it's just more of the same.
Yeah.
But in this, there's no escalation. It's like it's just another. Okay, well, they're going to wipe out another room of henchmen that pose no real threat to these immortals.
Yeah. Same with the Fast and Furious franchise. Look at how every single one of those movies they try to go more epic than the last, but they always come up with different stunts. They always, like, no two heists in Fast and Furious have ever been the same. Like, they've always done new ways about it, whereas this one just felt like more of the same. So, I don't know, I still want to see it as a television series, but I really hope that from maybe now on, they bring in, like, a different writer, at least, to try and inject something into this series, because I think it could really suffer from the fact if they go back and use Greg Rucka to write the entire thing. It just could be more and more of the same. And again, I'm not trying to dish dirt on the guy, because the guy does have a history of writing cinema as well, but I don't know, it just feels like it's one of those times where you needed that kind of outside view of these characters to give them like a little bit more life in cinema. So I guess to finish off, what are you going to give this one out of 5?
I'm going to give this 2.5 out of 5. As an action movie, just even ignoring like the characters and story, just as an action movie, I didn't think it was that entertaining. Like, I thought the action scenes were edited well, at least. Like, I thought it's impossible to compare them to how well filmed and choreographed the fight scenes in a movie like Extraction or Atomic Blonde or John Wick are. But I thought, as far as how well the action scenes in this movie were edited, they were at least coherent and miles ahead of a lot of other action movies that I've watched. But, like, I was very, like, even just the actions, speaking of the action scenes themselves, I was just very unimpressed otherwise. Like, the soundtrack of this movie, I'm not even going to compare it to the soundtrack of Highlander, like with Queen, because that would just be unfair. But they've got, like, the weakest music I've ever heard in it. It sounds like something from a cheap CW TV series, like not a huge movie starring Charlize Theron. And that was what I thought the saving grace of Extraction was that it was like the action sequences. Even though I thought the story wasn't great, the characters weren't great, the action sequences were really amazing. Like the choreography, that really sold that movie for me. It was a great popcorn movie just for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, here I was really let down by it. I think it is just a very mediocre movie. It might, maybe in retrospect, it might be elevated by its sequels, because, like I said, they're really planning on making them. But yeah, I'm just kind of this one was just very weak on its own. So just a flat 2.5 out of 5 from me.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 3 out of 5. I do want to see something vastly improved with this series, because I find these characters kind of interesting. That's I think the most frustrating part about this. If it was just a bad action movie with characters that I didn't care about, I wouldn't care. I'd just be like, you know what, it's a 1-star movie, I don't want to ever watch it again. The fact that these characters actually do kind of interest me, because I love history and I love mythology, it's what makes it so frustrating, that I do want to know more about this world and I want to know more about these characters, but I wasn't given that, and that's what makes it so funny. Like, it's an overlong movie, but it feels like it gave me nothing. It's just, yeah, I still can't get my head around it. Like, it just really, really infuriates me. And again, like I said before, I would love to have seen this as a television series instead. I think it's the only way that you could do justice to this series, is actually make it kind of an action television series. And I guess to sum up, it was 2.5 stars from Kyle, 3 from me from the old guard. I've been Dave G.
And I've been Kyle.
And we'll be back very, very soon with another episode of The Popcorn Conspiracy.